So I'll give you just one little quick update on my chess game. I told my grandson, Clark, I said, hey, Clark, I preached about you on Sunday and about how you beat me in chess. And he just goes, ha, ha, that's funny. I go, well, what's funny about that? He goes, you thought you had a chance of winning, and I thought, oh, you little stinker. So I haven't played him chess yet, but I've been practicing on YouTube. I'm almost tempted to download the game on my phone, but I just don't like chess that much. So, but anyway, his eyes kind of lit up, and I thought, oh, he's going to be like, oh, that's okay. Anyway, so many times he tricks me a lot, with things, and I'm gonna get the upper hand on him one of these days, but we'll see. But with all that, we've been going through the book of Matthew, and like I said, Easter's happened in our timeline, but we didn't get there through Matthew like I planned. So what we're kind of taking this in my mind as I've been preparing these sermons, it's that time Jesus has been crucified, risen from the dead, Easter, right? And he's ascended back to the Father. It could be afterwards, as I was thinking about this, the disciples, they're a little bit lost. He goes, just sit here and wait until the Spirit comes to you. And we'll get to that in a minute. But while they're doing that, of course, Peter says, well, let's go fish. Let's go do something. And slightly before that, before he rose those 3 days, they were hidden in the upper room and they were hiding in a house. But they're reminiscing and they're thinking about things that Jesus said. And if you're like me, sometimes things dawn on me a little bit later. When people especially when teachers have taught me things, and I remember sitting in class with Trig going, I don't know why I have to do this stuff. I'm never going to use it. It was years later when I'm working in some construction things, thinking, man, some of those formulas or algebra, A square equals B square. Anyway, the 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean theorem, and I'm thinking, I'll never use it. I use that stuff almost every day. It was amazing. I thought about that last week. I have a big window we have to replace in one of these old buildings I have. And, of course, the building's settled over the years, and you can't cut the window square because it won't fit. And it's a big piece of glass. So the glass guy come out, and he got all this electronic measurement stuff out, and he was, zapping the corners. I said, that's cool, but we could go corner to corner and apply some trig and algebra and figure it out. So he did it his way, I did it my way, and we both came to the same conclusion pretty quick, but I didn't have the $15,000 worth of equipment that he had. And I thought, okay, I learned a couple of things in school. Most of them I did forget, I'll tell you that. But the disciples are the same way. They were walking with Jesus Christ for 3 years. And a lot of what he said just went in one ear and out the other, because they didn't have the understanding. When they went into Jerusalem, just like when I was playing chess with my grandson, they were kind of a little bit full of themselves. Everybody's celebrating, Hosanna, Hosanna, and they're walking right with him, and they're throwing all the coats down, and I'm sure they swelled up with some pride, thinking this is it, but we also realized they underestimated their enemy. And they didn't understand what Jesus had already told them, that I'm going to be beaten and put to death and rise on the third day. And he told them plainly. There's some things that he's told us plainly as well. But today, we're back to where Jesus was prior to going to Jerusalem. He had set his eyes resolutely on Jerusalem. He was traveling there, but on his way, he was teaching rapid fire. He was healing. He was doing these things. But he changed tactics, and what he's doing is he's only teaching in parables. And if you're like me, I don't always understand it right away. So we're going to walk through some rapid fire parables that he is teaching mainly his 12 men. But there's other disciples around that are also getting taught, but not into the same degree. So we're going to start back in Matthew 13, verse 24 is where we let off. So it's Matthew chapter 13, verse 24. The first point of today is hear and understand. Hear and understand. Again, like school, I heard the teachers a lot, but I didn't really understand, nor did I take the time to try and understand. But today we're going to change that. Verse 24, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seeds in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seeds in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." We go to verse 31. It's a parable of the mustard seed and yeast. He told them yet another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like the mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of seeds, yet then it grows to the largest of the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like the yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked through all the dough. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So it was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. "I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world." Now we'll go into some explanations here. Verse 36. When he left the crowd, he went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out his kingdom, everything that causes sin, and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous shall shine like the sun of the kingdom, and their Father who shall shine. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of the Father. Whoever has ears, let him hear." We're going to pause right there. That's quite a lot of teaching. Some of it makes a little bit of sense, some of it does not. But to hear and understand, we have to understand the first parable, and that's the sower of the seed. Back in those days, they would sow, they would plow their fields. Today we were driving in, and we came behind two big tractors and their planters and all these things. And one guy had a brand new rig, it looked like, big, red, not green, and had an implement. And he was actually way over the side of the road, but it was so big we could hardly, get around him. But we got around him only to speed back up and hit a big green tractor with another equal size big planter. One had tires, one had tracks. I don't know the difference and why they do all that stuff, but they're out planting. And why are they out on a Sunday? Because it's been wet, and now it's supposed to rain again on Monday, so I understand their concern and wanting to get it all done. But they weren't sowing like they did in these days. They couldn't put out those arms and do 120 feet in one pass and things like this. They were sowing seed by hand. They would do a row and they would plant. They had a lot of servants that would do this. But there were times back then where if someone didn't like you, or maybe there was a squabble over a property line or something like this, or whatever it would be, the enemy, the bad guy, would take just a handful of weed seed and just walk through the field to the cover of night and just kind of throw them around. And back in when I worked for my father-in-law doing landscaping, we planted a lot of daylilies and a lot of ornamental grasses, and you do these big beds of them. And there were some grasses and water grass and things like this that would come up in the middle of those daylilies and things like this. And when they were young, you couldn't tell the difference unless you were really, really good. And you would, is that the daylily plant, or is that this water grass thing that would grow up and the leaves look the same? But you could really tell as they matured, especially when there was a bloom on the daylily. You're like, oh, that's just... And the crazy thing was the water grass stuff would pull out really easily. Where the daylily was rooted, and you're like, okay, well, that's a daylily. I'm not going to pull that one, but you would pull the others, and of course we would throw them out in the whatever pile and haul them away. So we have the same thing here. We have a good seed sown. and the weeds are sown. You don't know the difference until the maturity, right? The wheat's harvested, the weeds are harvested, the weeds go into the fire, and the wheat goes in the barn, right? The next one is the mustard seed. A friend of mine once, and I should have done this, I didn't have time, showed me what a mustard seed is. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but you put one in your hand and you can hardly see it. It's very small. But it says that it'll grow up and be like a tree. A mustard seed, when it's let to grow maturity, usually when you do see those in the field, they're only like 10 or 12 inches tall. And I thought, mustard seed, that's not a tree. But I didn't know this. In the right climates and things like this, with the right conditions, they can grow 10 to 14 feet tall, which is not a tree like you and I would think, a huge monstrous thing, but it's a tree that the birds would land in, and there's some seed on it, and they would munch around on those. So again, this is a very agrarian society. They would have understood exactly what Jesus was preaching and teaching. And then there's the yeast. I love this. A small amount affects the whole bowl. So we're building in Greenville right now a restaurant in one of the old buildings that I have, and we were somewhere in Edwardsville and ate at a steak place. What was that? Steak? Oh, come on. Big Horn, Little Horn, whatever, or Texas Roadhouse. Okay, it was way off. But they have those big rolls, and they come out and they're nice hot. I thought, oh, that would be great if the restaurant could serve those. They're really good. So what I do, I got on YouTube, and how do you make those? I don't know. And it's just a little bit of flour and some stuff and some live yeast. I don't know the difference between, I know you're saying stop, Breck. Do I cook? Can you tell? But they mixed it in. And I thought, wow, that's pretty easy. I thought I'm going to go home and do it. And they said, no. But it's a great example. Just a small pinch is all you need in this bowl. So what's going on? Go to the next slide, Gordon. What's going on with these examples and these stories? Just so we have a little bit more understanding. The good seed in the weeds. So what Jesus is telling his disciples, there's imposters. There are those that are claiming to be something they are not. They're going to come in, they're going to look like they're the right person, they're going to say the right things, they're going to maybe even do the right things, and they're going to kind of hook us in, right? But they are imposters. And what does an imposter do? They take resources from true believers. When I was in seminary, I had some counseling classes and things like this. And one gentleman, it was just he and I were talking, and he says, Breck, you have to be careful and be wary of the time suckers. I'm like, time suckers? What are you talking about? Those people that want to come and just talk. They have no intention of changing anything they want to do. They just want to come and complain. They want to come and hear themselves speak, and they want somebody, and they'll come time and time and time again. And they gave us some tools to kind of try to help identify the difference. And maybe it's someone who's just really trying to justify their lifestyle, right? Or it's someone who's just not ready to hear the truth yet. And I have to tell you, an addict, and this is even from personal experience, not that I was an addict, but like an alcoholic and stuff, won't be ready to be helped until they hit the bottom, right? Until they come to the end of themselves. And it's really like about any of us, like, oh, I can defeat this. See, I didn't drink for a week and I'm no problem with it. And then they go right back to it. All these addictions have these types of things. There's other addictive behaviors, but it's until they hit the bottom, and then you can come in and you can help because they really want to be helped. One last example is this. It's like when a person is drowning and they're thrashing and all of this. And when I took a class years and years and years ago, they said, you never race out to help that person until they stop struggling, because they'll grab you and they'll pull you down as well. And I thought, wow, so anyway, it was just some great advice there if you're ever in the ocean or something and somebody's struggling. But so that's, there are imposters claiming to be something they are not. The mustard seed, small starts, right? They can bring great results if allowed to grow. Great results. And the third one is the yeast. Also, small amounts can bring big results. Why is he telling all these disciples this? Because he will be in just a few days killed. And they're going to be confused. He's going to rise again. and he's going to come back, and and the Pentecost, all these things are going to be happening to him, but they had to be grounded and rooted. So here's my question to us today. How about us? I'm going to say all of us. Do you ever feel small and insignificant in your Christian walk? I have, many times. We all play that story. For me, it's been several things. You go to seminary, man, you're going to get your degree, you're going to set the world on fire. Everybody's going to want to come and hear what you have to say. And I've always been part of a larger church. One church was 3,000, another one was, several, all these things. And I got to be honest, I'm just going to confess this to you. I've already said it before. I came to Greenville, well, the population isn't here, and we looked for a church, and they're smaller. And then God called us to First Baptist Church. And I remember the day I walked in here, Ruby was sitting in that bench and turned around and smiled. And I've said this 100 times. When she did that, I'd never been in this church before. I knew we were home. I looked around, there was like, maybe that time 20 some people here. And I thought, okay, through Ryan, I actually taught that day. And then the next Sunday came, and we didn't really have a church. And where do you want to go? And I said, well, let's just go back. We'll just sit, And we did, and it was great. And then they came and they finally asked me, Breck, would you want to come here and preach and teach? And I'm like, well, you're pretty small, in my mind. Not insignificant, that's a little too strong of a word, but what difference will it make in the big picture of everything? These are all thoughts that went through my mind. And I'm going to jump ahead. I've grown to love this little church. I don't want the big church. And I've actually had a couple offers to go to some other place. I'm like, no. But it's this. Because one Sunday I left after teaching. The church had grown to about 20-some when I started, and then it shrunk to about, 12. And I thought, okay, I'm being real effective here. This is just what I dreamed. And I left church one day and was driving back, and I thought, Lord, if I'm the pastor that closes this church, then I guess I don't want that, but so be it. That's what I had in my thought. I don't mean to be emotional. When we look at our lives and we think, I've made no impact or little impact. A friend I met in seminary, a black man, has all these degrees, called me out of the blue. It's Breck. God put me on your heart. I have one thing to tell you and one thing only. This is not in my notes, but Zechariah 4:10. Do not despise these small beginnings. For the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Why am I emotional? I have failed so many times in my life. Business ventures, different things that have not gone the way I thought or had the impact that I thought they were going to have. And we can get pretty discouraged. And we can start saying, Lord, this isn't for me. I'm just going to go do what I know and what I can control, right? Then God says this in Isaiah, see, open your eyes and see. I am doing a new thing. A new thing. Now it springs up. Do you perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. God is doing a work in your life and mine that doesn't make any sense. You may have failed here and failed there and failed here. And he's telling his disciples, you're going to follow me and you're going to be my disciple. And I'm jumping a little bit ahead. But it's not going to have the results you think you're going to have. Because it doesn't depend on you. It's me. And I am doing this work. And you may be small. You may have people who you think are your friends and are always going to be with you, and they'll abandon you and they'll turn against you. And you may think, man, it's just me. No one understands. You're that small bit of yeast. And God says, yes, but I have yet to mix it in the bowl to see the increase. I was amazed when I was watching these YouTube videos on how to make these rolls. I didn't know you did this, but you put this yeast in and you stir it up and you have this little bit of dough, and they said then you set it aside and you cover it up and wait. And then the guy in the video says, I'll be right back in a few minutes. The video cuts off, video starts back up, and that bowl that was covered is this huge mass of dough in there now. The yeast has to have its effect. But it was in dark. You don't just leave it open on the counter. He covered it with something, I don't know, and he said he's set it aside. Is that where you are right now? Has God done a work and a stirring in your life, and you think, man, I'm going to go do this, but you feel you're on the sidelines? I'm retired now. I have no effect. I have a sickness. I have all, whatever it may be. What lie has the devil told you that you have believed for too long? Don't you understand? This is what he's telling his disciples. I love how he ends with the yeast, because something's going to happen in God's timing. And he wants to go on. He's got more to teach these men, and this is the second point. Value is in the eye of the beholder. We've all heard that, right? Value is in the eye of the beholder. When my mother-in-law, before she passed away, and I've shared this with you, she had this blue spiral-bound book with all these treasures written in it. You know, she had, precious moments and Hummels and I don't even know what all this stuff is. Silver spoons. This is where I bought it. This is what it's worth. And it really meant a lot to her. And like, man, the book's right up here, you know. And after she passed, and my father-in-law, who was very grieving, he goes, I got to clean this house out. I got to clean stuff up. And unfortunately, that blue spiral-bound book got lost in the transit. And we were there picking things out. And one day I said, hey, did anybody remember that blue spiral-bound book? And everybody, oh, yeah, it's up here. And it was gone. And, we didn't know what all these little collectibles were. Finding out that one time they had a lot of value, but people collect things different. They go in and out. And now we had just a lot of stuff to deal with. Bless her heart. I thought, she left us some nice memories, and we have a few of them, but not all of them. So the value is in the eye of the beholder. And Jesus is explaining this in verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And in his joy went and sold all that he had and bought the field. What I love about that is he just didn't take it. He bought the field, so it was rightfully his. In verse 45, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away, sold everything he had, and bought it. This is kind of crazy. When I've always read this, I've always taken it as, man, I'm the guy. I found Jesus. I'm selling out, and I'm going to Jesus. There's a great value here, everything else. And I believe I've read this parable wrong. Why? The question I have in here, who is the man and who is the treasure in the field? It's really what we got to define. The answer is this, is Jesus is the man. And we're the treasure in the field. Why is that? I put him here, who sold and gave everything for the field? Not us. It was Jesus, right? He saw you and me and valued us more than life itself. No greater gift has anyone given than to lay down their own life for a friend, right? Jesus Christ gave his all, his everything. To do what? To purchase you and me from sin so that we could have a relationship with him. And he goes on about a pearl, right? A pearl. A pearl is actually a small grain of sand that gets into an oyster oyster or whatever, and it irritates the oyster so much that the oyster will start to crystallize the covering over that piece of sand to stop the irritant. And it says it usually takes, when I looked it all up, about 7 years to form the smallest of pearls, of a quality pearl in there. But then you get one of bigger, that means that pearl's been inside that oyster for a much longer period of time. But what happens is that irritant, that little tiny grain of sand, becomes something of some very, very high value. And people hunt them and look for them. Isn't that something? So really, what is Jesus explaining to us in this thing? And there's a question. It's, how about us again? Can you begin to see how valued you are by Christ? In the beginning, he's saying, there's a sower's done all these things, and we believed all these lies. And, I hear people have this low self-esteem, and we don't value ourselves anymore because I have failed here, failed there. Jesus Christ knows that. And he says, you're like this grain of sand right now that's an irritant. But wait till I get done. I'm going to come in, and I am going to shape you into that new thing. And again, it's done in the dark. It's done in the quiet. It's done in these things. And then one day that's going to be revealed. And people are going to want it. But there's one more point, and this will all come back together. And it's point 3. Fully committed, ready to serve is what I came up with here. So what are we going to get here? Jesus, again, is preaching, teaching very rapidly. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is, verse 47. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down in the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore, and they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be in the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into a blazing furnace where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they replied. He said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old. It's quite a pivot there. We're going to go ahead and read 53 to the end of the chapter. When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began to teach the people in their synagogue. Capernaum, he's getting much closer to Jerusalem, by the way, just a side note. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get his wisdom and these miraculous powers? They asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, John, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. And he did not many miracles there because of their lack of faith. All of this ties together. Fully committed, ready to serve. There's a parable about the good and the bad fish. It's just like the wheat and the tares. They grow together, they're separated at harvest. One of my trips to Haiti, we were on a beach, and there were these men that were fishing in an old dugout type of canoe. And I was amazed. I was watching them as they were out in this beautiful bay, standing on the edge of this tree trunk that they had carved out, I'll call it. And they could balance perfectly. They could throw this huge net out, and they would pull it in. Well, after a few hours, these guys finally came back to shore, and in the bottom of the canoe were some fish. And there were still some fish that were even tangled in the net. And they sat there for the next hour. And now in Haiti where they were fishing, it's overfished. So the fish were pretty small. And they were digging them out of their nets and in the bottom of the boat. And they would look at them. And they would take the good ones and they would throw it in a basket. And the bad ones they would just toss back into the bay. And I thought, this is what these people saw. When Jesus was teaching, they knew exactly what he was preaching about and what was going on. And these guys were doing it the same exact way. And they would come at the end of the day, they just had one little basket full of some fish they could take to market for all that work. And I thought, wow, it's not like us today with a big tractors planting the fields and the big fishing ships out in the sea. These guys were throwing that net every day and pulling it back in. And then when they were done, they had to mend the nets and they had to clean the nets so they could have it ready for the next day. It was just fascinating to watch. But the good and the bad fish, they grow together and they're separated at harvest. What was Jesus, why was he explaining this to them? And this is what I wrote down. Jesus was asking his disciples, really, if they were fully committed to become his disciples and thus own their faith in order to share it for others. What I actually, being at the university and things like this, these young people will come to schools, and some of them are rock solid in their faith and their walk. Other ones are shaky. And over that 4 years, you kind of see them a little bit, some fall away from their faith. Not many, believe it or not. And some, they come to know and own their faith. And it's no longer mom and dad's faith. It's no longer grandma and grandpa's faith. It becomes their own faith. Even those that kind of struggle. And I'll share this with you. Samuel, who led singing up here, he did a great job, even wrote some songs. Well, he stepped down because he went through a time where he was like, Breck, I don't know that I can sit and listen to you preach and teach, and I'm struggling right now with a little bit of my own faith walk and what do I really believe? And I said, well, man, let's talk about it. We talked a little bit, but he wasn't at the point where he could really accept a lot of what he was hearing. And he got into some school where they have to teach some psychology, things like this. And I did get a text from him a few weeks ago. He's in California now, Riverside, California, helping lead worship in a church out in California, doing what's called OPT, because he's an international, they can work for a year, just a side note. But he's out there working. He goes, Breck, I just want you to know, thank you so much for being patient with me. I struggled a little bit in my faith, but I just want you to know I have come back and I am solid in what I believe. And to me, it was a huge growth experience for him, taking what he had heard, processing through it, and coming to his own conclusions. Now his faith is his own, and he is sharing it. And he goes, I'm eager to learn more what the Lord wants to teach me. As he shares it through his music, he's writing songs, he's doing these things, different things. In fact, for graduation, which was Saturday at Greenville, Janie ran into someone who's rooming with him, and they took their pictures together. It's just kind of neat to see a little bit of that connection. So Samuel's doing very, very well, and I'm proud of him that he's doing that. So here's a question I have. Again, it's how about us? Are we really ready to fully commit? Because Jesus is telling the disciples, you know what? People are going to come along, like we've already said. They're going to act like they love you and act like because they're going to want something from you. And then you're going to struggle with just being the small and insignificant feelings of, I'm all alone. Everyone goes through that. Elijah, with the prophets, when he called down the fire, what did he do? I'm the only one left when they feared his life and had to run away. So there's all these periods, but there's also a period of growth. And Jesus is also telling them, you're one person, and I'm going to send you out into a world by yourself after I'm gone. But I'm going with you in the Spirit, and you don't think you're going to be effective. But understand the story of the yeast. And what's amazing about this is in the parable, she mixes a little bit of yeast in 60 pounds of flour. Everything I said is, everything I watched was just a little bit of flour, That is a massive amount. I don't know what she was going to cook with all that, but that was a massive amount of bread, of dough for the yeast to work in. And the value is in the eye of the beholder. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What Jesus is saying, and even the parable we read last Sunday, there's the seed that falls on the ground. What are you valuing? Are you valuing something other than what God values in you and sees in you? Are you valuing your job? Are you valuing your activities? Are you valuing your wealth? Are you valuing friends or just your own stubbornness more so than God? Here's a crazy thing that I learned, and I've struggled this for a long time. In some of my development work and stuff, things I do outside the church, I walk a lot with people and I just I have a lot of struggle with. When I was at the university, I shared some of this with you. I had to go to some charity dinners for some political people that our values just flat out did not align. And I thought, why am I here? I remember one time in St. Louis, I was at one of those events, and everybody I was talking to, this guy had gambling facilities, this guy had a strip club, this guy had this, and they're all at this event. And I'm like, I went to the bathroom. I just had to get away. I'm like, Lord, why am I here? I don't even want to be around these people. This is just, I was so frustrated, but I had to stay because it's all political to try to get grants to do other work at the time. And I calmed down. I went back and stayed a little bit longer, and I finally left. And it wasn't till yesterday morning when my wife and I were sitting at the table, and we a few years ago we handed out these Oswald Chambers devotional books, and I opened up and I read today's. I read it a day ahead of time. And it said this: God will bring a number of people around you who you cannot respect, but you must exhibit my love to them just as I exhibited it to you. And Oswald Chambers wrote that, and he based it off of John 15, which I loved you. Now go love with the love that I have. It's a bad paraphrase, and it hit me. We are salt and light. We are to go into some places like this and represent who? Jesus Christ. And I struggle with, well, I'm not preaching to you. I'm not sharing the gospel. But you know what? I'm also not laughing at your dumb jokes, and I'm not partaking in some of these other conversations, and I'm not acting the same way you are. We are representing Christ. It was the same thing he did. He engaged with the Pharisees. He engaged with people who just wanted to despitefully use him and get healed to go their own ways. He walked through it all, and he goes, this is what he's telling his disciples. I am sending you places, and you don't even understand what I am doing. But if you follow me, I will be with you. I will bless you. You are not insignificant because you are my son and my daughter. You are not on the sidelines. I waste nothing. Trust me. That's why we go do our jobs that we go do. That's why we visit with the people that come or walk by our pathway, because God is doing a work that we can't comprehend. And it is a work of eternity. But he ends with something else. Are you ready to fully commit? But you have to understand this. The hardest ministry there is to do is right here in your home. Jesus explains it. He went back to his hometown. People who knew him and said, and preached in the temple and said, well, who is this? You're a carpenter. You're a carpenter's son. You're Mary's son. I know your brothers and sisters. I babysat them. I did whatever. I taught them in school, you name it. And who are you that you can do these miracles and things like this? And Jesus said, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, his own home. We have to understand, just because God lays it in our heart, like I thought in the very beginning, boy, I'm going to graduate seminary, have this degree, and now people are just going to throng to listen. No. He says, that's not how it works. I want you to go in the mess, and I want you to represent me. It's hard to do at times because we can say, I'm not making an impact. I'm not big enough. This isn't significant enough. What difference does it make? I had a phone call the other day from a good friend of mine who works for Caterpillar up in Peoria, Illinois, and he had a young man that he was talking to, and I'm sorry if I already shared this. He worked for me when I had my iron company. I didn't even remember that he worked for me. And he says, man, you have this is my buddy was talking to this other young man. He goes, you have a very real entrepreneurial spirit. You can kind of see things and you can go after opportunities that the other people don't really see. And he goes, I admire that in you. And he goes, oh, I'm a Nelson. And he goes, what? He goes, yeah, my old boss, Breck Nelson, he could do that. He could see that. I did not even remember this kid's name. I didn't remember that he ever worked for me. I had lots of young guys work for me over the years. He remembered it. And then as I was thinking, I thought, oh yeah, he is that young guy that worked for me, that we were carrying these big fence panels down a hill, and he fell over with a fence panel. A fence panel kind of fell on top of him, and he was like, Just kill me here and bury me. I can't do this, And he lasted about another 2 days. He wasn't even with me that long. But he saw something that I didn't see. I was just doing my job. What impact are you making? Now just think about this. What if we became more intentional? What if just being this passive reactive? What if every morning we got up, Lord, I'm your servant. Send me out. Let me represent you. And we become more intentional in our walk. You know what that represents? That's that bowl of dough after the yeast has been added and it's uncovered. That's the wheat that grows in the middle of the tares and starts to produce its crop. That's the one who perseveres and endures in trials and tribulations. I believe that's what ministry is all about. And you don't have to be a seminary student. You don't have to be a pastor standing up in front. That's the easy stuff. The hard stuff's when you walk out those doors. And somebody says, I know you. You're the person that did this, did that. Yeah, but God's worked on my heart. Become intentional. We have a response. And if they don't listen, they don't listen. It's not our job to bring the result. Our job is to represent who bought us with a price, who saw us before we had great value and has created something in us that now has value. So I challenge you this week to do just that. Take the morning before you're out of bed or after you're right out of bed, have your cup of coffee, whatever it is you do, and just say, Lord, I am here. Teach me. Show me what I'm supposed to do. Help me to be intentional with my life. That's it. God says, you're on. And he'll do it in his time, in his way. And more than likely, you may be times where you recognize it. Sometimes we identify a weed and we'll recognize some of the work that we've done or doing. Other times we're not going to have a clue. And that's okay. Because we're going to continue on our walk with him. So, just to review the points. Hear and understand. Value is in the eye of the beholder. We need to fully commit and ready to serve. And Christ will do the rest.